Can you see if can you connect? Yes, it's
Yes,
on live now.
your meeting.
Awesome.
Okay, it's on live, guys. Take care. Good luck.
Hello, everyone. Sorry for the technical difficulties, but we've managed to get through it. Welcome, everybody, and all the live participants right now. As has been described, this Facebook Live meeting is about discussing the film Song for Tibet, and we're really, really honored today to have one of the main protagonists or people profiled in the film, Thubten Samdup. I would like to describe the film a bit formally first and formally introduce Thubten. The people that I'm seeing on the call now, you've all seen the film?
Yes.
Had a chance? Fantastic.
I just watched it.
Excellent. And I'll discuss it a bit further as well. But the formal introduction of the film is very important, as well as, again, the introduction of Thubten. The award-winning documentary film, A Song for Tibet, focuses on two Tibetans in exile in Canada. Thubten Samdup, who escaped from Tibet after the 1959 uprising against the Chinese, and Thubten taught traditional performing arts in Montreal and it's depicted in the film, it's depicted that he heads the Canada-Tibet Committee, and Dickie Choyang, born in a refugee camp in India, who knows Tibet only through stories recounted by her parents. The film follows Samdup and Dickie from Montreal to Dharamsala, India, and also documents the Dalai Lama's first public appearance in Canada. The protagonist of the documentary, Thubten Samdup, is here with us today to share his experiences and reflect on the Tibet issues 30 years after the release of the documentary. Thubten Samdup was born in Lhasa, Tibet in 1949. Samdup arrived in India as a refugee in 1959. He joined the Tibetan Institute for Performing Arts, TIPA, in 1960, first as a student, later teacher, and eventually became its director. In 1973, Mr. Samdup was the recipient of a John D. Rockefeller Third Fund Scholarship, under which he studied ethnomusicology at Brown University in the United States. In 1980, Samdup moved to Canada, where he served as president of the Tibetan Cultural Association of Quebec. In 1987, he co-founded the Canada-Tibet Committee, a cross-Canada network of Tibet advocates, serving as national president for 17 years. In 1990, Samdup was elected as the first member of the Tibetan Parliament in exile, representing the Tibetans in North America. In 1999, Thubten proposed and oversaw the establishment of the International Tibet Network, a coalition of more than 100 Tibet groups from the Americas, Europe, Asia, and Africa. In 2008, Samdup initiated the kalontripa.org project, which encouraged individuals to anonymously nominate candidates for election as Tibetan Prime Minister. In 2009, Samdup was appointed as representative of His Holiness the Dalai Lama at the Office of Tibet, London, a position he held until September 2014. Samdup is the recipient of an Exceptional Artist Award from Harvard University and the 2005 Hero of Compassion Award, a project of the Grace Family Foundation. He is included among the Committee of 100 for Tibet and has served on the board of directors of several Tibet-related organizations in Canada, the United States, and Europe. So I'll just say a little bit about the Canada-Tibet Committee, which is sponsoring this live broadcast. The Canada-Tibet Committee is a national non-governmental organization that defends and promotes human rights, democratic freedoms of the Tibetan people. The CTC monitors developments inside Tibet and builds public awareness in Canada through its outreach activities. The CTC encourages support for Tibet from the government and Parliament of Canada. So that's the formal part. Let's begin the more informal part of discussing the film and about Thubten's participation in film and what's really changed and transpired in the intervening years. Thubten, is there something you'd like to say before we have some of the participants ask you some questions?
Well, yes. First of all, I want to thank Sharap for organizing this. Sometimes you go through certain frustrations. And I felt when Sharap said, I recently saw this film called The Song for Tibet. I never knew. And, watching that film, all of a sudden it was evident that the challenges we faced 30 years ago, people are still facing it today. And over the years, I've learned few things. I've learned how to work within the different parliament groups in the world. And one thing I came away from it is when I first worked with the Canada-Tibet Committee in Ottawa, meeting MPs used to give me a huge thrill. Wow, they took the time to see me. And it just went on and on and on. And it got to a point that, I'll make it short. 2004, His Holiness visited Ottawa. And at that time, unlike his normal visits abroad, in 2004, we had a very specific, we had a project that we had worked very hard of all the Canada-Tibet committees. Basically, we said to ourselves, what is it that we need to do to make a real change in the Canadian Parliament? Because when you go and meet with them, they're very nice. They always say, well, it was nice meeting you. I'm a huge fan of the Dalai Lama. And if there's anything we can do, we'll be more than happy to help out this and that. And it's, pleasantries exchanged. And then you go your own way. And then we decided, the Canada-Tibet Committee at the time, that in order to really Canadian government to rethink and change perhaps its position on Tibet, is that we must lobby members of parliament. Because at that time, there were 302 parliamentarians in Ottawa. And at that time, Tibetan community was very, very small. But we were very fortunate that throughout Canada, we had at that time 11 CTC branches in Canada. So we all worked as a team and tried to work with non-Tibetan friends. And they were all very dedicated. Really, really hard-working volunteers that we had. And we decided that we're going to get like 50 members of parliament to sign on to a letter from the members of parliament to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister at the time was Paul Martin. And simply, the letter would say that we, as a Canadian parliamentarians, we believe that Tibetans, as the Dalai Lama has always said, we need to sit down with the Chinese counterparts and have a dialogue face to face, a genuine dialogue. And His Holiness has always made it very clear that he is not seeking a separation from China. He goes around talking about this like a mantra. He always says, we're not seeking independence from China. We want to have a talk. What we're looking for is a genuine autonomy for the people of Tibet. In fact, sometimes he even has said that the Quebec in Canada, what the Canadian government, the way it respects the province of Quebec for its own tradition, culture, and language, and all that. You know, something similar as per the Communist China's constitution. And we, as Canadian parliamentarians, we feel very strongly that Canadian government must take a position and give Tibetans and the Dalai Lama a tangible support, not just a lip support. And we decided we're going to work on 50 members of parliament. But then, to our surprise, we had almost 2/3 of Canadian parliamentarians who signed on to that letter. And we were very pleasantly surprised, and we worked really hard to get the Tibetan government in exile at the time. The Prime Minister was Samdung Rinpoche. Samdung Rinpoche also came to Ottawa. His Holiness, obviously, His Holiness was the chief guest. And we had also arranged the first meeting between the Dalai Lama and the Canadian Prime Minister, Paul Martin. And at that time, we felt, with almost 2/3 of Canadian parliamentarians signing on to this letter, simply saying that we as parliamentary members of Canada, we feel that the Canadian government must act as an honest broker between China and Tibetan government in exile, with Dalai Lama's representatives, and have a dialogue. And Canada will do its role to play the honest broker kind of role. So our thinking was, when you have almost 2/3 of Canadian parliamentarians signing on to a letter, we thought that the Prime Minister will definitely deliver something. And unfortunately, His Holiness visited Ottawa. The whole visit was very, very successful. I mean, many MPs have even told us that you Tibetans and the CTC members, you, with such a small group, you guys make a lot of noise. I mean, we did, you know, and we made sure that Tibetans and Tibet supporters lobbied their own members of parliament in their writing, which is today I find with like thousands of Tibetans, you know, that doesn't happen. And I think this is something that we have to keep doing. And we have almost 10,000 Tibetans in Canada. So I think that's something that we have to keep doing. And also, members of parliament, I mean, most of them go back to their own writing 2-3 times a month. And it's very important that not just Tibetans, but the Tibetan friends to meet with members of parliament, with some non-Tibetans. And I, you know, just among ourselves, it's just, it impresses members of parliament, because I have noticed that when I go and meet parliamentary members, and when you have non-Tibetans, many of them ask the questions, tell me, how did you get involved with Tibet? You know, and these are volunteers. They'll say, well, you know, we feel that the Tibetans have had a very, very difficult time, and Canada prides itself on being the peacemaker in the world and defender of human rights, this and that. And we must come to their aid. And that's why we feel very strongly. And many of them would say, look, we want a better world. And the Tibetans, you know, the struggle is a non-violent struggle, a just struggle. It needs to be supported. So at the time, you know, when we were doing this, we really reached out to so many Canadians, and, you know, it became really like we felt as if the whole country was behind us. And many reporters, for example, became our friends, and they became very knowledgeable about Tibet. So now, I mean, I see here some young Tibetans. I mean, I was your age when I first started doing this. And as you all know, I mean, we're going through a very, very, very difficult time. And I was fortunate enough that for 5 years, I was able to represent His Holiness in London. And I had 11 countries under my jurisdiction. And I visited all the parliaments and MPs and met a lot of good people. And the potential, if everybody worked hard, you wouldn't believe there's so much support out there. But sometimes it's, on our side, I feel that we lack coordination. Now, what can I say? I started, when I came here, I said to myself, I'm not going to talk too much. I'm just going to listen to questions that you may have.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, so
share some of the mistakes that we've made. And, so I'll stop here for now. And
thank you,
that's some
Thubten.
questions, yeah.
Yeah, it was very inspiring listening to you now, and certainly I personally saw that film probably maybe 25 years ago, but it seems like yesterday when I rewatched it again. And I know Phil said he recently watched it, and all of you have recently watched it. And you have and have now and had back then that fire in your eyes when you were trying to bring His Holiness here, how you got quite upset when the Canadian government wouldn't provide security.
Yes.
Is all that incident still really vivid in your mind? How you were trying to get the Canadian government to understand, and in the end, you were successful to get him security, but also to respect His Holiness and to meet him. How many visits has His Holiness had since the film?
Since the film, about 5 times.
Wow.
Yes.
And the members of Parliament and the government would meet him on subsequent meetings, wouldn't they?
Oh God, I mean, when His Holiness came to the Parliament, it's unbelievable. The members of Parliament with their spouses, their children, everybody wanted to see His Holiness. I mean, I was trying to stop MPs trying to get a picture with His Holiness. I mean, it was like, it was just like some rock star, you know?
Yeah.
So over the years, what I've learned is I have even told His Holiness about this. People want Dalai Lama, and not many people want Tibet. You know?
Yes.
And I've also noticed that His Holiness has become so well known and so well respected. I think that's something that I've also told Tibetans, that we must understand that Tibetan struggle has to be resolved before the Dalai Lama is no more. Because
Yes.
I find it very difficult to say this, but I've seen it. For example, when the Dalai Lama is coming anywhere, let's say London or Paris, telephone in our office rings off the hook. We don't even have to send the press releases. When the Dalai Lama leaves the city, all of a sudden, telephone stops ringing.
Yeah.
You see, and that's something that it really so
Yeah. It's almost painful to think
yes.
about this elephant in the room that you are openly discussing, that yes, if the world doesn't solve the Tibet issue before His Holiness moves on,
Mhm.
it's unfathomable. I can't even try to think about what might happen. But let me just open it up to the other participants in the Zoom call. I really look forward to, I know there's students on the call, youth on the call, they're academic and legal. So let me just open up the floor a bit to the other participants. If you have particular questions to Thubten about the Tibetan cause, certainly about specifically the film. Does anybody want to jump in there?
So I have a question, if that's okay. Hello?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes, Tenzin.
Thubten Samdup, so I was, at the end of the video, you're on the phone and it seems pretty intense, and you're saying Canada is willing to speak up about human rights when there's no price to pay. You mind like running us through like what was going through your mind, and who were you on the phone, if you're able to answer?
Well, we've had so many situations where I've seen, those days, let's say in early 80s, Canadian Parliament, the Department of Foreign Affairs, they would always say that human rights is the cornerstone of Canadian foreign policy. Very important. So, I've heard prime ministers talk about, for example, at that time, there was something going on in Sri Lanka, and the prime minister even canceled his visit because there was something going on, human rights violations. And then when it comes to something like China, all of a sudden, they sing a different tune. How important China is, and with China, we have to deal with quiet diplomacy and all that kind of stuff. And, it's just on and on and on and on. For example, about the security issue. It was really very painful to watch when we were, practically begging for the Canadian government to provide security. At the time, they would say that we can't because there is no threats made against the Dalai Lama. Therefore, we can't. But what we were saying is, look, number one, he is a well-respected spiritual leader in this world. And also he is the Nobel Peace Laureate. My God, that's the least this government can do, And for example, the threat business, I remember telling one of the MPs that I know quite well, I said, it would be very easy for us to arrange some threatening calls. Is that what it takes? The government should be making some tough, decisions. It's their country, the Dalai Lama is coming. Should something happen, that would be very embarrassing for the Canadian government. It was like little things like this, So first of all, we have to deal with China, and we now have to deal with a country that we have adopted and trying to get security. So like all along, it's like every step, it's a problem. So after a while, you get very sort of, you just get very depressed. Another word, I guess.
I have a follow-up question, if that's okay. So 30 years later after the documentary, China has become the second largest trading partner of Canada. So I was just wondering, like, from your point of view, like, how has the conversation between you and the Canadian government changed? Has there been like more responses from the government or less?
It really it depends. I find that I mean, I'll be very honest. When I was working on Canada-Tibet Committee, we normally went towards members of parliament who had some credibility in the parliament, you know, who are respected from both aisles, rather than targeting a particular political party. So we were very fortunate that at the time, now he's gone, Warren Ullman, who was a champion. He had even become a Solicitor General of Canada. I mean, he was also interviewed on the Song for Tibet. He's been someone who really, you know, it didn't matter what party he belonged to, he was a very strong supporter of Tibet. And those kind of MPs we were trying to get together, and that's when we first started the Canadian Parliamentary Friends of Tibet. So now, since then, in 30 years, the Dalai Lama's, you know, his stature in the world has become so iconic, and that, you know, if we, and also the people respect his sort of a standing on no matter what. Violence should never be used for any struggle. The Tibetan struggle needs to remain nonviolent. And many parliamentarians I meet, I always tell them, you know, I mean, they say that His Holiness has such a wonderful sense of humor, and he's always smiling and happy and all this. And one thing I always tell them, that yeah, it's very true. But one side of the Dalai Lama that you don't see is when he returns back to his home, then he's always fighting a lonely battle to save a people and its culture, you know. And you know, it's just like, if we want a real loving, compassionate, sane world, it's incumbent upon us to make sure that the Dalai Lama prevails in his, you know, fight to save his people. Otherwise, everything is just empty talk. So now, I mean, as you all know, His Holiness 85 years old, you know, and I mean, he single-handedly, he has kept Tibet alive now, and he still does. And we have a long way to go. That's why, I mean, it's nice to see today many young people, you know, on this. That's what I told Shirapos. I'd like, there's some things that I have, you know, experienced in life, and I'd like to share with young people, you know. So, I mean, it is a wonderful opportunity, and I hope, you know, it's a Friday night, and some of you may have some plans, but thank you for coming.
Yeah. Eliza, I see you have a question.
Yes, I have a question that I think follows quite nicely with what Sandupla was discussing about youth. What advice or guidance would you give Tibetan youth and non-Tibetan allies? What advice or guidance could you give them about how to move the Tibet issue forward? And what should allyship look like? And then, is this guidance different than what you would have provided at the time that the film was released 30 years ago? So is there any difference in what you would tell youth today from what you would have told them 30 years ago?
You see, 30 years ago, I have to say, I had just come from India. And I've said this many times before, that when I left India, to be very honest, I didn't have any plans of working for Tibet. You know, I just wanted to live in Canada and, you know, do my own thing. I didn't feel that I needed to work for Tibet. After arriving in Canada, and especially in Quebec, many times when people ask me questions, where are you from? You know, I said, I'm from Tibet. And they say, Quebec? I said, no, Tibet. Quebec? No, I said, no, Tibet, country Tibet. And I was stunned that not many people knew about Tibet. You know, I came from Dharamsala, where all young people from all over the world, they come to Dharamsala, you know, and I felt, oh, Tibet is very well known. Look at all these people coming to Dharamsala. But then when I got here, I just said, many people, they'd never heard of Tibet, but people have heard of Dalai Lama. So I felt that I needed to do something because I was at an age that the young Tibetans in Canada at the time were very, very, very young. The older Tibetans, their parents, none of them had gone to school. They had no formal schooling, but they were very, very together. And you know, they didn't know how the country worked, how to lobby the government and all that kind of stuff. So in Quebec, I became the president of the Tibetan cultural community. And plus I was teaching young Tibetans Tibetan language and Tibetan music and dance. So I more or less sort of became the leader of the community. And I started doing a lot of things, and that's how I believe I was elected as the first member of parliament for North America, US and Canada. And then I became very political. And then I met many, many non-Tibetans who wanted to help out. And in 1987, that's when we decided to start the Canada-Tibet Committee, because many non-Tibetans said, look, you know, if there's anything that we can help with, just don't be shy, just let us know. And obviously we needed help, you know, so I'm in my home, the basement became like an office. And we did so many things from that basement. Yeah, I'm very proud, you know, looking back, what we have achieved. Today, I see so many young Tibetans have had education in this country, speaks both languages, many. I mean, really, now we could do so much more. But sadly, I don't see that coming. I don't know what the problem is. I also see that many Tibetans like social media, and most of them do spend minimum 2 hours a week. So I feel that, you know, a little bit of a rethinking, you know, and there's so much that their parents had given, you know, when they have had no formal education and all this, and they just did whatever's asked of them, you know, making momos to, you know, I mean, all kinds of things. It was very close-knit, wonderful. And I really, I mean, I always say this, I could not have done all the things I did if I did not have the backing of the community. Whatever I did, I always felt that I have a backing. They'll back me up. So it was easy in that respect. So my hope is that more young Tibetans will rethink how they should, what they should do. I mean, there's so much they could do. So
You mind giving us an example of like some of the things that we could be doing? So you said like with having education and being able to speak both languages, you said we could be doing a lot more. So you mind elaborating on that, please?
Yeah, for example, I've said this to the Tibetans in Europe also, that His Holiness has always talked about how important it is to do outreach to the Chinese, right? And for that, again, I started something in Dharamsala in 2006, outreach work to the Chinese, because, we've done pretty decent work in terms of raising the awareness of the Tibetan situation in the world. We've done fairly good work, but for some reason, as far as educating the Chinese people on the situation in Tibet, we have completely ignored. And I think it's important that we do some outreach to the Chinese students. For example, any North American cities, you've got thousands of Chinese students, right? And each Tibetan, let's say, decide to do outreach to 2 Chinese a year. If 100 Tibetans do that, that's 200 Chinese. Because sooner or later, these Chinese students will return home, and they're going to be holding pretty important jobs, whether it's in business or politics or what have you. And here's a perfect opportunity. I've had this experience. I've sat down with them and talked to them about the Dalai Lama's thinking and how the Tibetan government's position and all that. After a while, they say, oh my God, if that's true, why is it that we've been told all the time by our government that the Dalai Lama is a splittist and this, that kind of stuff. So there, obviously, I think young Tibetans can do something. And also working with, for example, Shirap on Canada-Tibet Committee. I mean, it's sad because when I came back from London, my wife and I visited Calgary, Toronto, a lot of places trying to get some young Tibetans to come and take over CTC. It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. But, I was quite sort of surprised. So, like in anything, the more you do and you learn, and, you just, sometimes I say to myself, if I was 20, 30 years younger, I could do something else, because this is how you make a contribution, right? Not all of us would be working in Dharamsala, right? We do what we can in our own place. So, for example, there are many cultural events happening in Canada, as you know. Tibetan community can always take part in them, whether it's music and dance or what have you, So be part of it and be active.
Yeah. I want to be mindful of the time. Particularly with our technical delay, I'll add on. We probably have about 20 minutes. Just real quickly though, it sounded to me, watching the film and listening to you right now, Thubten, a lot of your involvement was quite natural and organic when you were young. And I can only suggest, coming back to Eliza's question, even speaking as a board member of the CTC, there's no shortage of volunteer work we need help with, everything from graphic design to building a website to writing petitions to writing articles for a newsletter. So again, I would totally back up what Thubten said. There is contact Sherpa, and I'm sure he'll have an interesting, meaningful task for you. Beyond that, is there, again, only about 20 minutes left. Are there other questions people would like to address to Thubten? Yes, Phil?
It's Friday. We can stay on a little bit longer, if anything.
Okay. Phil, go ahead.
First of all, thank you so much for participating and honoring us with your presence. Thubten Samdup, sorry. I very much enjoyed the documentary, and I was a little bit saddened. I'm always saddened when I, watch a documentary on Tibet. I feel uplifted and saddened at the same time. It's an experience that's. I find the story of Tibet heartening and obviously sad for humanity and for our planet and I was ashamed as a Canadian to learn about how difficult it was when His Holiness first visited Canada. I had no idea that he had been shunned by the Chrétien government that way, and I was quite sad. We're supposed to be, big defenders of human rights, and again to see trade relations with China, be so important. And I know this didn't stop, and even though further governments met with His Holiness and political leaders, there's still always that sensitivity to China. However, that leads me to my question now. With COVID and the recent changes in international relations towards China, I'm seeing some changes in Europe. Canada's seeming to change its position a little bit too. It looks like a time of potential transformation and perhaps some optimism. And I wondered if you had any insights about the international change in the past little while and how that could help the Tibetan cause. Did I cut out there? Yeah,
No,
my
I think
last
we heard everything,
question. Oh, because I saw something about the internet connection was unstable. I don't know if, okay.
No, it was all right.
Good.
A quick one. Yes, and many Tibetans have mentioned about this. Now the timing. It's we've never had this kind of opportunity where the world community as such look at China in a very different light, and perhaps this is a good time for Tibetans to rise up. But what's happening is when it comes to China, the Dalai Lama's position has been very steadfast as to, being sort of nonviolent and reasoning with the Chinese and that kind of thinking. Whereas now the Tibetan, for example, more young Tibetans, understandably so, some of them are quite militant, saying that, many of them would say, with all our respect and love for Your Holiness, you're trying to fight a battle in the world where there's no market to love and peace. And this is very difficult. And more young Tibetans feel very frustrated that something has to happen. And the only language is the violence that the world community understands. So this has been a huge battle among us. And now more militant ones are even mentioning now, this is the time that we cannot lose this opportunity. Now we have an election, Tibetan election coming. And this is where I'm hoping that maybe one or two candidates who are running for the prime ministership, somebody would come up with a clear way. If we are going to go for total independence, somebody has to stand up for it and run on that ticket. You know, we need our political structure. It's important, I think. It makes more sense to have parties with its own platform, because right now we have all of them the same kind of position of middle path. And, now, one thing is for sure, the Tibetans have become, a lot of young Tibetans have become more vocal, and many of them have recently been on Indian national televisions and all this, and very, very vocal that India's security is making sure that the Tibet prevails in its struggle. So something could change in the next few months. Right. I don't know. But you're right. Many Tibetans feel that the timing, this opportunity must not be missed.
So Thubten, you mentioned something there that maybe some people would really find interesting. Do you think the Tibetan community at large is ready to support a candidate that is whose platform is outright independence?
Well, I don't think so. But I mean, when I worked on the KalunTibet.org in 2011, the reason I just felt that we needed in Dharamsala a new blood, a new voice, because we just can't have the same people, doing the same thing over and over again. So in order to have a change, I felt that it's important that we introduce a new voice, a new blood, and it happened. And now it's reached a point that we will never know how much of Tibetan population would go for independence. It's at the election time. This time, if there is a candidate who runs on that ticket, let's say if we get 15% of the vote, that tells you something.
Yeah, definitely.
Otherwise, I don't think there's going to be any change. People will talk about it, and that's about it.
Yeah. Do you have a follow-up question to that, Phil, or?
I just want to say, I definitely believe that action has to be taken. But I was also sad when I saw, and I appreciate that the Republicans in the US have been doing some decent legislation, supporting Tibetan independence and whatnot. At the same time, I think Trump is part of the problem, and I think his violent approach and his powerful approach to politics is similar to China's.
Yeah,
and to
like
side with Donald Trump and think that he cares for Tibet and that ultimately his politics will help Tibet, I think is very misdirected. And I think war and pushing for power politics for the Tibetan cause is I'm quite disturbed by it. And I think that's what makes the Tibetan cause so wonderful, because it perseveres with its peaceful message, despite all this violence that has to end if the world's going to go on, and learn to coexist and to have a better planet and better cooperation between all nations. We can't go the way of China or the US right now. So, and I'm optimistic if Biden comes in. There's a new international push. I would like to see cooperation between nations, and I'm hopeful, and I hope that Tibet will also, the issue of Tibet will come back up stronger now that people are seeing the changes and what China's been up to more clearly. Because as you said, a lot of people don't know about Tibet, but they're starting to learn about China now, and I hope this is an opportunity for more people to learn about Tibet and to make the world a better place. So I just wanted to add that, and I'm sorry for taking so much time, and I know that Dassel has some questions as well, and probably Losong. So, but thank you, and sorry for my 2 cents there, but just felt I had to share that.
No, feel free
Thank you.
Dassel, you have a question?
Yeah,
I mean, I guess if there is a follow-up question, if I do have time, I'd be curious to know. Yeah, Dassel, yeah.
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to convey my utmost gratitude to all the work that you've done so far with the CTC, and to your wife as well. And my question, I went over like all of the successful campaigns the CTC has been able to accomplish and the reports that have been released. And I saw that CTC was instrumental in sending a Tibetan women's delegation to the fourth World Conference of Women in Beijing in 1995.
Yes.
And I'm just curious, how did that come to be?
At that time, there's a group of Tibetan women who very active, and the Beijing Women's Conference was an opportunity that they saw, and many of them, like including my wife, she was there as well. They would go to international conferences and representing not CTC, because CTC won't be allowed, but some other organization. And with the same idea, we took, and all these Tibetan women who went there, they were all representing different organizations. And it became, I mean, this is something remarkable. And, the coverage was huge, and especially the Canadian media was following the Tibetans in Beijing, wherever they went. So that was it was just, when you're in that kind of a world, then you learn things, how to work. And these are some of the ideas that they picked up from their friends. And they went to Beijing, and two of CTC members went to Philippines also at one international conference. So those were at the time, it was a very interesting times also. There were a lot of there was CTC, of course, there was the Burmese group, very active, and there was the East Timori group, very active. So, those very exciting days for the NGOs.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have a question for Thubten?
I'll chime in real quick.
Awesome.
Thubten Samdup, thank you so much for having us here, and my utmost respect to you for the more than 3 decades of work you've put in for Tibet. My question is regarding a statement you made in the film. I think that was it was one of the most emotional scenes for me, where you were talking about how Tibet is sometimes can be conceived as a losing battle. And then you see Kundu, and through him you see a flame of hope. And then just now you were talking about how the Tibetan elections, we need a new vigorous leader who's able to bring new flame to the Tibetan movement. I wanted to ask you, by placing those two perspectives, it's to some degree, I think it's contradictory. I was wondering what if you can expand on it, and wanted to see how you view it. And also, I feel like it's the whole notion about Tibet being viewed as a losing battle is also sometimes what Tibetan youth sometimes undergo, and there are moments when we see it that way also. And I was wondering if you can, if you have some words on how you were able to overcome those moments in your life.
Yes, very true. For me, I always say this. I always have to find ways to do things where you would get a higher return for your investment. I don't like to do things for the sake of doing it. I have want to make sure that there's something you will get in return. Now, lately, what I've seen is in the Tibetan world, and most of the activism is done over social media, and that's it. And I just feel that we cannot go on for another 10, 15 years doing the same thing we did back 30 years ago. As I said before, I mean, it's in every Tibetan's mind that His Holiness is not going to be around forever. So we have to find ways to expedite if something is going to happen. That's why I feel that it would be interesting. Now, if there is such a candidate who runs on a ticket of the total Tibetan independence, it's not that all of a sudden the Tibetans are going to turn into violent or group something, but it'll give some, in Tibetan language, we say, ooh, it's like it's, breath. Because sometimes otherwise I find many people just doing the same thing over and over again, not really thinking. And then that's what they've done, let's keep doing it. So every March 10th we get together, we scream our heads off, and then 1 year is gone, that kind of stuff. So if we want to get a good result, I think we really need to think properly and plan. And it's very important. I mean, the earlier somebody asked me that question also, that I find, for example, we need a city like Toronto, 10, 20 young Tibetans who are well-versed in the Tibetan struggle. And when universities, when they ask for speakers, we have a roster of Tibetan speakers who are ready to go and speak, right? 30 years ago, we couldn't do that. And otherwise, I find that problem still in Europe today. Like, invitations keep coming, and the representatives can't go to everything. So if we had a roster of 15, 20 Tibetan speakers, that's something very tangible, right?
Yeah.
So something like that, we have to think.
Like in the sports world, we need a much deeper bench.
Exactly.
Of strong, good Tibetan activists that we can call upon, yeah. Are there other questions? Losang, do you have follow-up or any other questions? No? Anyone else have any other remarks or questions? Not at this moment. Okay, well, we are at the 50-minute mark, which really means we've hit our hour for the session. So maybe we'll wrap up. I'd just like to circle back to, I think, circle right back to Tenzin Chosan's original remark that he noticed in the film. You had that other powerful moment in the film, Thubten La, when you, as Chosan mentioned, when you said, Canada will speak up when there's no price to pay. And I'm certainly hoping with really this new world we find ourselves in right now, with COVID and the kidnapping of the two Michaels, and China is fighting so many little battles on all fronts right now with India, South China Sea, certainly Hong Kong, the Uyghurs. And, what I sometimes say when I do speeches, their original sin, the invasion of Tibet. I hope that, and I think the time is ripe that Canadians, first of all, like you said, Thubten, we have to acknowledge there's a price to be paid. And I think Canadians may have come around finally to be willing to pay that price. And that sometimes may be literally out of our wallets for more expensive goods manufactured in other countries. Like, we have to face these tough decisions, and I think Canada's ready. But the question is, our government ready? So I'd just like to conclude, Thubten, that I so thank you for being truly one of the founding fathers of the Tibetan movement, but not just the Tibetan movement, but battling for human rights. And thank you for your example. And current and future activists really do stand on your shoulders. So I thank you, Thubten.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yes,
And,
thank you for the great example. Yes.
All right. No final remarks for anyone? Okay, we'll
Absolutely.
conclude the call. We'll conclude this meeting. Thank you so much for everybody's thoughtful questions and your remarks. I really do appreciate everyone's participation. Thank you.
thank
so
you.
much, David.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.